Like, are there
Mm.
trends and themes in trauma?
Yeah.
There are. Okay.
Oh, I mean, that's such a good question because we identify trauma as like big T and little t. And so like, for example, one of the modalities that I use a lot with clients is EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. We don't have to get into it. But along with that, you take basically a trauma timeline of people's lives before you get into the trauma reprocessing. And when we talk about that, what I tell people is, when you're thinking back on like the things in your life, like I want you to be not just thinking about the big T traumas that we all know about: war, abuse, assault, natural disasters, giant car accidents, like things that like typically society culture is like, oh yeah, that's trauma. But like the smaller things that when you think about it, it still has fire. Like there's still, tears well up behind your eyes. You like instantly have like a reaction to it in your body. And that could be bullying. That could be remembering your parents fighting when you were a little kid. That could be, a sibling being horrible to you. That could be a loss of any type of relationship. It could be moving a lot. It could be having a horrible boss. Like that's, and I think it's like some of those things that we think are little t traumas are actually big T traumas. And a conglomerate of little t traumas are actually more impactful in the brain and body than singular big T traumas are. Hi.
Courtney Rose, what's going
What's
on?
up, Noble? How are you?
It's so good to see you.
You too. This is great. I love your setup. This is so cool. Oh,
Oh, thanks. Awesome.
it's been
Now,
good.
how long have you been in business?
I think 3-ish years or so. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it's been like a gradual growth. So
Okay.
we have 6 clinicians right now, in addition to me, and we have another one coming on in the summer.
No
So
way.
it's
That's
crazy.
exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. But I mean, now's the time that people are seeking mental health. I saw something
That's
yesterday.
right.
I think yesterday it was like 302% increase, like in the last 2 years, like of people seeking therapy services. Isn't
You're
that
kidding me.
wild?
Wow.
Like
That's amazing.
302%.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for being willing to let me grill you and ask you questions. And who or what is your sweet spot with what you do?
So my umbrella is trauma, which is like it's funny because it's kind of a catch-all. Like I decided to specialize in trauma because it affects almost everything. And there was a something that I heard. I think maybe I even said this in our thing, like in grad school, that if trauma were taken out of the DSM, it would be all that would be left is a pamphlet. And I think that that's so true in so many ways.
Mm,
And so, with that, just I work with a lot of individuals, a lot of adolescents who've experienced and survived acute and complex trauma. And then I also work with couples and families. And so, but it's kind of everything. It's lots of anxiety, lots of depression, lots of suicidal ideation. Um, when I first started down the path of like being a mental health practitioner, what I came to it as like a later career. So I decided I needed to get some experience while I was also getting education. And I ended up working in a residential treatment center with women who had borderline personality disorder for 2 years. Um, and that is where I cut my teeth really in like
mm.
in this field. And that to me opened up my eyes to this like incredibly stigmatized diagnosis is just a cluster of trauma symptoms. And then it was
Mm.
like, oh, so is almost everything else, basically.
See, oh, that's so fire. So okay, so this is awesome. So I just talked with a homie. A guy just reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, dude, I've seen some of your content, and he's like, your brand and you completely resonate with me because I have tattoos and
Mm-hmm.
I was an actual gangster, and I have been diagnosed as bipolar disorder, and I
Hmm.
desperately need EQ. And
Oh,
and
wow.
and so and I'm like, and he's like, will you help me? And I said, well, I can't help with the bipolar stuff because that's again above my pay grade.
Sure.
But what I did not tell him, but what I was thinking was, so I said, dude, on the EQ space, absolutely, dude, I can help you. I can give you some EQ exercises, some emotional exercises. We can talk through some stuff. But I said, anytime we venture into any bipolar stuff, that's you got to go to a professional, someone that's got
Yeah.
the certs and stuff. Um,
Sure.
but what I did not tell him, but I was thinking is, I wonder how much of that kind of stuff is
Hmm.
due to unhealed, unworked through emotional trauma from their
Hmm.
life, right? Because he's had it's the Jerry Springer childhood, right? Just a jacked up. His mom was an alcoholic, no dad. He became a drug dealer. He did drugs, all this stuff,
Right.
and but super high function. Went to West Point, crazy successful, but just manic behavior, right?
Mm.
Super high highs,
Right.
super low lows, and I
Right.
just thought to myself, like, man, I wonder how much of what this guy is manifesting and how he's behaving is due to unresolved stuff when he was a kid.
Right. Well, and it's so interesting because, I think that like psychology is like a soft science. So everything is like, well, theoretically, like we don't actually know anything. We know this much about the brain. And what's kind of interesting about like bipolar is that's like supposedly one of those things that's like left in the DSM after you take trauma out because it does have so many genetic components. But the reality too is like, okay, we are learning so much about like what early childhood trauma does to the actual functions of the developing brain. So to your point, I would think that that has to be one of the like another thing that like if there are actual neurological things that are going on in the brain of a bipolar person, yeah, there's probably some amount of that I would guess is affected by trauma. If
Hmm.
and not all just genetics.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe as he gets healthier emotionally, will it
Hmm.
will it completely resolve the bipolar? Maybe not, but I can't imagine that it wouldn't get somehow better in
Right. Yeah, I
in
would
some form
imagine.
or fashion. And at a
Right.
minimum, because I know for me, at least getting him some tools of some
Hmm.
self-awareness tools, some self-management tools of kind of how to regulate his emotions.
Yes.
And again, so maybe will it help everything? Maybe not, but it's gotta. I would imagine it would help a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would think
Yeah.
so too.
What was it like for you to work for those 2 years with
Hmm.
women with
Hmm.
many of those kind of scenarios? What was that like?
It was really hard, and it was incredible. It was incredibly fruitful. I tell people, because I was doing my master's at USC concurrently while I was working in this residential treatment center, and I would say my education was probably equal in both scenarios. It was, you know, it was really like eye-opening to me because again like I said like there was this real like realization of like empathy for these women because what I would do a lot of times I had like either late night shifts or like because I was not a professional yet. I was just like this random like community counselor who was getting some degree, but I had no credentials, and so I had bizarro shifts, and I would just sit and I would read their files at night just because I was wanting to like soak up everything and learn everything I could, and there were just so many parallels and repeated scenarios of just complex trauma. Oh, complex trauma. Oh, there's complex trauma again. Oh, complex trauma. Oh, complex trauma. And so, and again, like all the while in grad school, kind of hearing here and there too about the stigma around particularly borderline as like a diagnosis, because most therapists won't touch it. And like learning really that it was like, wow, like this is something that is just these poor women have been through unimaginable things. And as a result, they have tried, their bodies and their brains have learned to adapt to survive, and nobody wants to help them. And like it was amazing to be in this residential treatment center where that was their focus. Like the sole focus of that place was to help people with this diagnosis. So I learned DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy that has like emotional regulation is like one of the like main tenets of DBT. And I didn't learn that in grad school. Like I actually did a presentation in grad school about DBT because we weren't learning it and I was learning it. So just, it was amazing. But I also had like kind of traumatizing experiences. Like I once was doing like a one-on-one with a person who they were discharging because of like a multitude of things. And as she was packing up, it got really quiet and I was like, what's happening? And so I walked in and she was trying to kill herself. She had tied like a cord around her neck and had a plastic bag over it. Like, and that was incredibly traumatizing at the moment. But it was also like, I was like, okay, I'm never going to experience anything harder than working in this type of environment with this population. And it really, that's kind of true, except not, I worked in one other environment that was harder, but doing that it was just really a great experience and also very, very hard at the same time.
Can't even imagine, right? Can't even imagine what people, what that experience was like for you.
Yeah.
And then, like you'd mentioned, the unimaginable trauma. And this is going to really sound trite given the context, but it is so true. Hurting people hurt people. Because I ask myself, how can we as humans hurt each other the way that we do?
Yeah.
And we've seen it in COVID, right? Where all of a sudden, like, you're this evil bad person if you wear a mask or if you don't wear a mask, or you're this evil bad person if you get a vaccine or if you don't get a vaccine. And just how easy it is for us to hurt and divide and whatever. Just our ability to hurt each other. And I gave a little, that's, I don't want to say that's nothing, because obviously that's been something for sure, and there's real impact from that. But
Right.
like the stuff that there's just just the evil that's out there in the world. And then like you said, so now they show up, these broken, hurting people show up at at your clinic or at some treatment facility or whatever, that have been through indescribable stuff. What are some things that you have learned about working with people with complex trauma or even acute trauma?
Yeah. I mean, so much. I think so. It's a very interesting concept, because the main, I think, force of like true healing that comes in like these deep relational traumas, and that's a lot of times like what the complex trauma is, right? Like it's familial, or there's something in the home that has happened, and or like even like in utero, or whatever. Like there's just a lot that can kind of go wrong in these like interfamilial relationships, and one of the biggest antidotes to that is healthy healing relationships. But what's like the rub in that is that like if you are somebody who is only, your entire worldview has been developed by people being untrustworthy or being unsafe or being abusive to you, and and that's what you've come to learn, and that's what you've come to expect, and that's what you've seen as love, it can be incredibly difficult to unlearn those habits, or to have your brain rewire in a way that even knows what to look for, because we do just seek familiarity even in dysfunction, because that feels safe, that feels like I know this, like I can be okay with this, and so like I think from like a very like base level, just from like a therapeutic standpoint, validation is huge in dealing with, and like you talked about, like when we were having that conversation at, the thing, like, yes, like I was like, validation and affirmation, like it's honestly, it's huge. It's like the foundation of like beginning that healing process. And in a therapeutic relationship, like that's the idea, is that like for people who've been complexly traumatized, that I'm like, we're modeling what a healthy relationship can look like, and how boundaries can look in a relationship, and you can have boundaries and still care about a person, and that like uh, that there's a teaching them how to value themselves and see themselves as worthy, because again, that's another thing that comes with like complex trauma, is this belief that like, okay, well, if all this stuff happened to me, like common denominator, right? Like there's only one person to blame here, and my meaning making brain is thinking it's me. And so, all of that kind of like unworthiness and not good enough has to be combated. And it's so much work, but it kind of starts with having I think that therapeutic rapport and that like consistent like recognition, validation, affirmation, and then also like encouraging healthy relationships elsewhere in community. And that's where like I again kind of just talking back to what we did with the mental health and teens thing, like community is so huge, like for those teens who are going through suicidal ideation and depression and stuff like that. And it's so true, but it's also very difficult to be able to trust it if you're somebody who's had that type of complex trauma.
Well, and also, I think the challenge is, and maybe it's because I'm in the space, but finding healthy community, right?
Yeah.
Finding emotionally healthy community, or a community that is safe enough to begin to process and discuss and share some of
Right.
your issues, is a challenge, right? Because there's so many emotionally unhealthy, emotionally hurting people out there, whether
Mm-hmm.
they're aware of it or not. Like here's another interesting. I'm going to ask a little spin here, that I've had some recent conversations with multiple leaders about executives about, because that's kind of my space, is
Yeah.
leaders or executives, and the number of leaders, and military too is also my background, but
Yes.
so the number of military folks and the number of people in corporate America that have experienced toxic leaders and therefore
Yeah.
toxic cultures and organizations is a lot higher than I had originally. I'm like, yeah, I've had, maybe a little bad leader here and there, but like, I, I think that's like, I think
Oh
the
yeah.
majority of people, I think, been on the receiving end of a toxic leader,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and that comes with its own set of trauma. I was in a business cult for 20 years, and
Right.
no joke, it took us 3 years to detox from that experience of being in that scenario for 20 years, 2 decades. There was a
Oh wow.
lot to work through and unpack, but it was 3 intentional years of working through. I mean, it was brutal. And so, corporate or professional trauma, I don't, that's probably not the right verbiage, but is I guess my question is all trauma created equal, or like, are there
Mm.
trends and themes in trauma?
Yeah.
There are. Okay.
Oh, that's such a good question, because so, we identify trauma as like big T and little t. And so like, for example, one of the modalities that I use a lot with clients is EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. We don't have to get into it, but along with that, you take basically a trauma timeline of people's lives before you get into the trauma reprocessing. And when we talk about that, what I tell people is, when you're thinking back on like the things in your life, like I want you to be not just thinking about the big T traumas that we all know about: war, abuse, assault, natural disasters, giant car accidents, like things that like typically society culture is like, oh yeah, that's trauma. But like the smaller things that when you think about it, it still has fire. Like there's still, tears well up behind your eyes. You like instantly have like a reaction to it in your body. And that could be bullying. That could be remembering your parents fighting when you were a little kid. That could be, a sibling being horrible to you. That could be a loss of any type of relationship. It could be moving a lot. It could be having a horrible boss. Like that's, and I think it's like some of those things that we think are little T traumas are actually big T traumas. And a conglomerate of little T traumas are actually more impactful in the brain and body than singular big T traumas are.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Man, that is so interesting. So there's a couple, so in my own personal emotional growth journey, one of the
Yeah.
things, there are two books that were really impactful of the number of books that really helped me out. But there were, one was called Running on Empty, and the
Mm-hmm.
second one was called Running on Empty No More. And both of them by a psychologist or psychiatrist, I don't remember. She's a doc, some sort of doc.
Yeah.
It was two books on childhood emotional neglect.
Mm.
So not what happened to you, but
Right.
what didn't happen to
Living.
you. Right.
Absolutely.
And I was like, what? Because she's like, in her book, she's like, we all can remember most of the bad things that happened to us,
Yeah.
but how many of us remember what didn't happen that we wanted to happen, right? To
And needed to
nurturing
happen.
and
Yeah.
needed to happen and getting affirmed after whatever, right?
Right.
All the different things. And it's like that like blew my mind. That's opened up
Oh
a
yeah.
whole nother can of worms that has real impact. We could say, come on, put some, in the army, we'd say, just put some foot powder on it, take a Motrin, and you'll be all right. Just right, suck it up and put your big
Right.
boy pants on. No, like
No.
it's real impact on people. Like you're saying, the it's so true. Like maybe it doesn't need to be this big, because I had a fairly leave it to beaver childhood,
Sure.
but still, one of the things
Mm-hmm.
I say all the time: nobody leaves their childhood unscathed, right?
Mm-mm.
Even if you had to leave it to beaver, like everybody leaves with some sort of emotional baggage,
Absolutely.
right? And so even those little, I like that. I love that the analogy, that little T trauma, multiples of those babies, they add up. And how I say it is, well, you heard my thing, but like
Yeah.
decades of stuffing and avoiding,
Mm-hmm.
that cute, furry, fuzzy little monkey when I was a little kid and learned how to stuff and avoid my emotions
Right.
is no longer cute, furry, fuzzy when I'm at 40 and it's
Right.
an 800-pound gorilla,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's fascinating too. There's a book called What Happened to You? And it's kind of a newer book. Have you heard of it? Or okay. So it's Oprah Winfrey and this neuroscientist guy who collaborated for like 30 years on all of this research about trauma, about childhood trauma, and like the effects on the brain and all of that stuff. I recommend it. It's a great
I
book.
wrote it down. Yeah.
Okay. But one of the things that they talk about in there is also like the timing of when trauma happens is incredibly impactful. And I think like what they found was like, if it's within the first 3 months of life, like if there is a like complexly traumatizing experience within the first 3 months of life, but nothing else for the rest of life, those children are worse off than somebody has trauma the rest of their lives from 3 months on, but didn't in that first 3 months, which is like, holy cow. But also like, I mean, anybody is not going to be great off, but still just like,
You're
yeah.
right. Wow. Mind boggling. How do you take care of yourself while you're taking care of so many other people? Like, so as the owner of the company, as a practitioner, as a,
Yeah.
doc who's taking care of people, you've got your employees, your staff, and
Mhm.
you've got the clients, the patients that you're working with as well, and
Yeah.
and your family, right? Minor detail, right?
Right.
You've got
Yeah.
all these hats. How
Yeah.
do you take care of yourself?
So it's funny because I think like self-care is it's almost like a meme now for therapists because it's like it's slammed in like grad school programs and like all these things. And also like, yeah, right. It's, I'm pretty good at, kind of having this space, like my space where I'm seeing clients and I'm doing this, like my clinical work, I leave it in this space. And one of my, like actually somebody in grad school kind of mentioned, like in this profession, you have to learn to not be a vessel, but to be a channel. Like if we are a vessel, it is going to fill up and overflow and flood us, and we're going to drown and burn out. If you are a channel, you can take it in, but you also have to let it leave you. And so I think about that a lot. Like I take a lot in, and also I can't hold everybody's stuff. I will go crazy. I have to let it leave. So I have, kind of like I don't even know. They're not really like rituals, but just like sort of like where I leave it. I leave it here. I pray about it, or I like kind of leave it with the Lord. I'm a big like I used to do I was a CrossFit coach and a CrossFit athlete and a yoga instructor and a personal trainer in a past life. So I really like exercise a lot. And that's like a big thing for me as far as like self-care and kind of like therapeutic, just like getting it out. And I have a really good like balance with my family. So like I guess I'm kind of working all the time, but also my husband's really like interested in it. So we can like talk through things that are work related. And then we also don't, and we go have fun and we do adventures as a family and things like that. But it's super intentional for me. And I definitely preach it to all of my people because in this profession, like especially if you're in community mental health, if you're in any like treatment center, like, you know, you need to do self-care because you absolutely will burn out, but there's no opportunity for it. And as the business owner, like I wear a lot of hats, but I also get to be in control of my time, you know, and if I'm overdoing it, it's my own fault because I don't have to be. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. The thing that I've noticed from some people, just in my world of EQ, specifically emotional intelligence, emotional health stuff, is like some people say, "Well, yeah, Noble, yeah, I know about EQ. I took a course on EQ. I read a book on EQ. I listened to a podcast on EQ."
Mm-hmm.
But then I'll ask, "So, what's your emotional fitness program look like?"
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, what do you want to know about EQ? Like, no, 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 that's not what I asked, right?
Right.
I,
Yeah.
here's a perfect example, right? I can tell you all about CrossFit, right, Courtney
Oh yeah.
Rose?
Oh, for sure.
But don't ask me if I actually do CrossFit,
Right.
right?
No.
Right? So
Yeah.
so there's a big difference between knowing about
Yeah.
EQ or emotional health or taking care of yourself and actually taking care of
Doing it.
yourself and
Yeah.
actually doing it and doing the emotional exercises
Yeah.
and that kind of thing, right? Because and I love what you were intentional at saying you're intentional at your own taking care of
Yeah.
yourself, which I think is super important. And most the folks I work with are the hardcore type A leaders,
Right.
hyper super achievers.
Perfectionist. Yeah.
I'll rest when I'm dead. And it's like,
Mm-hmm. Right.
that's cute when you're 20
Yeah.
or maybe 25, but I mean, at my age as an old school guy,
Mm-mm.
that's, it's the whole thing is another great quote I love is if you don't take time for your health, you, you will take time for your health in the
Yes.
hospital or, somewhere else. Right. So,
Exactly.
sooner or later you will invest in your health. You could do that
Yeah.
up front
Right.
or on.
Preventatively or
That's right.
it's so true.
That's exactly right. So I love
Yeah.
that. I love to hear because the other thing too, this other thing I found too with
Yeah.
some of you big cheeses and stuff is that, well, and not
I
just you
don't
big
know.
cheeses, but folks even like me too, is that, well, heck, how did I get into this space? I got in this space because I've been
Yeah.
emotionally dysfunctional for most of my life, and I've been a people
Sure.
pleaser addict and emotionally dysfunctional, emotionally codependent, emotionally needy, and et cetera, et cetera. And so now all of a sudden
Yeah.
I'm teaching other people how to be emotionally healthy and emotionally intelligent,
Yeah.
which is God's sense of humor. But
I love it.
there are a number of
Yeah.
counselors and therapists and docs, psychologists, psychiatrists
Yeah.
that are doing what we do for a reason because of our own
Mm-hmm.
childhoods
Right.
and things that have happened to us
Yeah.
without them doing their own emotional
The
work.
work.
And
Uh,
right, and so you've
no.
got this person that has the degree and the cert and the title, but they're
Right.
as emotionally dysfunctional or more than some of the folks that they're seeing. Right. And
Right.
so because I've had people say, "Hey, Noble, hey, how what's the EQ certification or degree that I can get because I want to be an EQ coach like you?" And I'm like, bro, there's no amount of degrees and certifications that will
Mm-mm.
trump a low EQ.
Right.
Right? If you're emotionally
You haven't
unhealthy,
done the
bro,
work. Yeah.
you don't like
Yep.
like I should not go get certified to be a CrossFit coach right now. Right? That's
Right?
just
Probably not.
right.
You could, they'd let you, but
Anyway, I love to hear
but
that
it is.
you're active with
And
this.
it's so important. It is vitally, I mean, and I think grad schools are actually getting better about that like some of them like actually require you to like be in therapy during the entire program so that like
Wow.
because it's kind of like a liability for them, if you are sending these people out into the world to be the holder of the space for so much of this, like you got to make sure that your own crap isn't be coming up all the time in your sessions. Like,
That's
yeah.
right. That's exactly right.
So,
I had another lady that I interviewed on the podcast. She is this big cheese life coach, and one of the
mm,
things that she said when she was started her therapy back, she's I don't know mid 30s, and she started therapy I guess like maybe in early 20s, and so she sat down her first therapy experience, some psychologist, and the
mhm,
guy was like, okay, tell me what's going on, and so she vomits all this stuff that has happened to her and her
right,
trauma and childhood and all these issues. And when she got
right.
done, the first words out of his mouth were, "You think too much."
Oh my gosh.
Right? Like, can you, like, and again, I'm not baller like you, but like, even in my world, right, as a executive leadership coach, I can't, like, dude, where do you gotta be in your own life to, after some young lady just pours out all this trauma and experience that she's had, and that's your, dude, that's your response? Like, really? Like,
Right. Oh,
and so now she's like, and I don't want to say like, okay, well, you just caused trauma, right? Or like,
right. Like, well, I'm never going back to therapy. Like, this is my experience. Oh my gosh.
yes, yes, and it just,
Oh,
it's just heartbreaking to hear that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
again, it's just awesome, Courtney Rose, that you're practicing what you're preaching. I
Mm,
love hearing that, hey, look, I'm you're taking care of yourself, right? Just like you would expect
yeah.
your clients and patients and stuff to do. So that's awesome. I
Right.
love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, this is another huge aspect of mental emotional health and stuff, is taking ownership and responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Because for during a phase of my, once I started this journey, I was in the blame. Well, Courtney Rose, it's your fault. You're the
Right.
reason.
Right.
If you were ABCD, then I wouldn't be GEFH, right? So I went through this
Right.
phase of blaming, and, well, it can't be
Yeah.
me, and because I was pissed and
Yeah.
embarrassed and afraid and scared and all these big emotions that were going on when I kind of started this journey.
Yeah.
How do you help people like start to safely take ownership and responsibility of this journey?
Right. I think so from my chair, like again, this is like a big part of that building that therapeutic relationship and like that rapport, because absolutely, like I start out with a ton of clients and it's like, it's kind of like a victim mentality. And like, yes, they have been victimized oftentimes so much in their life, but turning that into like, everything in my life is people are out to get me, or other people are to blame, or I don't have control over my life, or I have no, like all that stuff can kind of like start to snowball. So like it, again, like I think so much of it is just it's building like that trusting, like, hey, like I'm on your side, like I'm in this with you, like I validate like crazy all of the things. And at some point we get to like, hey, we've been talking about X for some number of however long, and it seems like there's a pattern here, or it seems like there's something going on here, like what do you think's going on? So like I like am real gentle with my approach to like having people start to look at whatever the scenario is from a different perspective. And I don't know, I think that's like, I'm, as a therapist, like that's just sort of how I do it, is just like I make sure that we have that trust, because I can be like gently confrontational with people as long as there's already that rapport built, because they know, that I only want what's best for them. But if I'm like coming out and being like, are you kidding me? Like, this is obviously your fault. Like, let's talk about, like that's not going to go well, like ever with anybody. So, and it's kind of like what's fun is to do it with couples, because like if you see the whole picture, it's like it's this interesting balance of like helping them to like validate each other while also pointing out like when they need to take ownership for themselves, which is easier to do when both people are in the room because you're making them both do it. And so there's a little bit more of like that balance there.
That's excellent. Excellent point. Love that. Yeah, that's excellent point. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I love so number one, I love what you said about, you've got to have the trust that's built there, and then also the gentle, what'd you say, sometimes you'll be gently confrontational.
Yeah.
um yeah, I like how you use that, and then asking them some questions. So for me, yeah, same deal, as I'll ask questions, but not from a threatening standpoint, from a non-threatening standpoint. Like, I come alongside you, hey, Courtney Rose, okay, let's work on this together
Right.
here, right? Versus like, hey, what's your deep,
Yeah,
yeah,
right. It's
because that,
curiosity versus like accusation for sure.
yes, that's exactly
Mm.
right. That's exactly right. What brings you the most joy in what you do?
Mm. All of it. Like I was I had like kind of a sorted past of careers. So I started in marketing and advertising, and then I transitioned into health and fitness, and then I went into grad school with mental health. But as soon as I started like at the residential and with my like master's program, I was like, oh no, like this is what I was supposed to do this whole time. Like what has happened here. So, and it's funny because I was going to major in psychology and decided not to because I was going to have to take a math class. And so instead of going that route, I took this really long journey all the way around and then ended up back there. But I love it. I feel like this is like, I had somebody that I worked with before who said like, she's like, there are people who are like good at their job, but there are also people who are anointed. And I feel like you are anointed for this. And that was like the greatest compliment I have ever received, is like feeling anointed for this work. And that's how it feels to me. Like in the depth of my soul, like this is what I loved to do, because I love to like help people grow and, and heal and guide them and be part of this journey for them. And so when people have those like aha moments, or when people have like just incredible kind of transformations that like nothing is overnight, these are crock pot therapy. Like I am not a microwave therapist. Like I'm in it for the long haul with people, but going back and reflecting on like, this is what happened. Like, this is what you came in with. And like, this is where you are now. Like, look at the work you've done. You're amazing. Like, that's just, yeah, I love it. I love the just, yeah, helping people to like find their truth and then live into like the life that they're supposed to have, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Love that. What do you feel are your superpowers?
I think building relationships with my clients is like I'm a client centered, like first and foremost person. I I'm an introvert myself, and not like, I don't like big crowds. I like just like intimate kind of like one-on-one relationships. And I like learning about people. Like I just want to know. I want to know their story. I want to know what's happened to them. I want to know what makes them tick. And I like genuinely care a lot. And I also like really love learning about new interventions and new modalities and things that are like gaining empirical research, and because I want to be the best that I possibly can be at this to like help the most people. And so I think all of that, like, just I hope comes through, which I feel like does, because in general I have pretty good rapport, and have been able to build a business from that. Because that's my goal. Is like, my goal is not just to like make money or like have therapists. My goal is to build like a culture of incredible clinicians who love what they do and who are helping people in the best way possible and providing the best care. Like that's the passion that I have. And I think it really is just like the bare bones. Like I just really I like what I do, and I like the people that like, I like everybody that I work with, even if they're hard clients, like I like them. So yeah, I guess that's it.
That's awesome. Love it. Well, and even that last comment, I love that comment, because when you understand that there's a reason why they're acting the way they're acting,
Yeah.
it's not me, it's like, there's a pea in their shoe, right? It's the pea and the prince, right? The
Right.
or
Yeah.
or the pea and the
The
princess, or
mattress or
whatever that is,
whatever.
right? With
Yeah.
all the
Yeah. Yeah.
mattresses, right? There's
Mhm.
some pea, some little rock underneath all their mattresses, so to speak, that is causing them to not sleep well.
Right.
and it is creating some sort of ripple effect in their life. And so, the way I like to describe it is, that's why I love coaching. It's we are like separated from birth, man.
I love
Because
it.
all those things that you said, it's like it's the same thing for me. It's like for me, and one of the reasons why I love podcasting and interviewing folks is I feel like I am a treasure hunter,
Yeah.
and I get
Ooh.
to find the treasure, right? That is in Courtney Rose, and how can I learn from me going on this treasure hunt in your life that can
Mm,
that I get to selfishly learn from also, and grow from, but also maybe in the process of me going on this treasure hunt and discovery, this adventure, you get to learn about yourself, like, oh man, that's why I am lashing out, or that's why I get angry so fast, or that's why I'm a food addict, or whatever those things are. Like, oh, well,
yeah.
right, and like you said, like seeing those connections and helping them be a part of their own healing journey, and I
Hmm.
get to like have a front row seat to like the movie of their life, of like they're
Right.
they're the hero in their life, and they're in their story, and I'm just holding the camera like, wow, check that. It's just
Yes,
so it's
totally.
it's so fulfilling and exciting, and it's
Mm,
just, man, it just feels meaningful, right? Because then the other
yeah.
thing is like, you don't know one of the things I say on my podcast all the time is emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally. And
Yeah.
you don't know the impact that one client that you helped make that connection today, who, who are they going to impact, right?
Right.
They're going to, well, the first people is little Johnny and little Susie.
Right.
Their
Oh,
little Johnny and little Susie's lives are going to be changed because
mm,
you're helping other people get
right.
healing, and you know
Yeah.
that's it's like there's no better crack than that, right? That's
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
best drug ever, of knowing that by helping these, well, I mean, you help kids, like legit kids directly, but like, for me, I'm working mostly with adults. So to
Right.
to to know that by helping these adults get healthier emotionally, it's going to help their children's environments a lot better as well.
Oh my gosh, which I think is huge because of generational trauma, like that is, and so often so pervasive. And so yeah, absolutely being a part of that ending, like that not going all on with this client, like that is probably the most, like one of the best things in the world. Yeah. Mhm.
That's awesome. I
Mhm.
totally appreciate the iron sharpening, right? So there's Proverbs 27:17, as
Yeah.
Courtney Rose, sharpens Big Poppy, right? You totally
Mhm.
sharpened me today, and I totally appreciate that. Um, okay, so how can so the audience, the folks that are watching
Yeah.
on YouTube, or the folks on the
Yep.
podcast, how can we follow you or find you, or what's your website, your company, your
Yeah.
business?
Yeah, totally. So the business name is My Denver Therapy. So it's just www.mydenvertherapy.com. That's honestly the best way. I mean, I have an email and a phone number and all that, but just the website has like 15,000 contact forms. So there's lots of different places to contact. But yeah,
Perfect.
that's the best way.
That's
Hmm.
perfect. So mydenvertherapy.com. And of course, I'll put all that in the show notes and stuff. Um,
Awesome.
again, thank you so much for your time, Courtney
Yeah,
Rose. And again, thanks for letting me, again, learn and grow and my own, as I continue very much
yeah,
intentionally my own, growth journey as well. I just really appreciate your time.
absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you for wanting to talk with me. It's so honestly, like I said, like I'm usually not the one talking. So I appreciate it. It's really fun.